Good afternoon and welcome to our second Aged Care Innovators session. This is the second, as I said, of a regular series that we'll be running where we speak with people leading innovation, both from a supplier standpoint and also in aged care services themselves. And today's speakers, I'll introduce each of those people. You can see them on the screen now. We've got Gillian T from Homage, Colin Putsey from Sylvia Adventures. Colin was one of our winners of the Future of Aging Awards in, I think it was 2020, so quite a few years back. We've got Nick Hansen from Anglicare Southern Queensland, Helen Lavery, Wesley Mission Queensland, and Julie Hogarth Williams from the Seniors Channel. So rather than me try to explain what these people do in the business of aged care, I might just give each of our speakers a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more fully. And we'll start with Gillian. Tell us a bit about what Homage is.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Sean. So hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. So a little bit about myself. So I'm Gillian. I run this organization called Homage, and essentially Homage is a care platform that is technology driven. We use technology end-to-end to empower and pull together, curate, train our carers. So everything from support workers to nurses to basic carers. And then we use tech to perform matching and assignments to personalized care plans for care recipients. So anyone who requires disability support, aged care, home care, and it's really been a great pleasure to just serve in this sector. We've been operational globally for about 6 years. The organization has currently, we have more than 16,000 carers on our platform and more than 2,000 in Australia. And in Australia specifically, we've been operational for about 2 years now. So yeah, it's great to be in this forum, and I look forward to sharing some experiences and of course learning from everybody. So thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, Gillian. And Colin, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Colin. I'm the founder of Silver Adventures. We are looking to eradicate feelings of loneliness and social isolation, specifically among older adults, through meaningful and shared virtual reality experiences. So looking to stimulate a lot of memories, have a lot of fun, bring a lot of joy to people, and ultimately drive a lot of social engagement connections among care residents, carers, family members, and yeah, have a really positive impact on their quality of life.
Great, thanks. And you, Nick.
Thanks, Sean. Nick Hansen, Chief Operating Officer for Anglicare Southern Queensland. Anglicare here in Queensland is an aged care community and social services provider to about 40,000 clients across the state. So we operate aged care facilities, significant home care operation of about 30,000 clients. We also have a few retirement villages and then a big presence in the social services sector. So things like out-of-home care, counselling services, homeless and housing services, and some youth justice initiatives as well.
Great, thanks. And Helen.
Yeah, hi. I'm currently working in residential aged care after having 7 years in community care, running national programs, working for Wesley Mission Queensland at the moment, which is very similar to Nick. Large portfolio, aged care in community care, residential aged care, retirement villages, and social services.
Great, thank you. And last, but certainly not least, Julie.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm Julie Hogarth Williams. I am the founder of the Seniors Channel. The Seniors Channel is an interactive platform that provides content to promote engagement and connection. So similar to Colin, our goal is to help alleviate the debilitating effects of loneliness and isolation. And we do that through two-way live streamed community groups and interactive content. We are launching later this year. And secondly, I'm also the co-founder of Australian Aged Care Innovators, and we had our first event on Tuesday night in Sydney.
Great, thanks, Julie. So let's get started. The first question I've got, and really the purpose of these sessions is designed to share both the point of view of the people supplying innovative solutions, but also the providers who are ultimately the ones that will be embedding these solutions, and also very much inspiring change in the sector. So when we talk about change, just how hard is it? I might go to you first, Nick, because as a provider of your scale and size, I mean, to implement change, what are the challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It is particularly challenging, particularly at the time that we're in at the moment, moving into reform and working through many of the reform outcomes stemming from the Royal Commission recommendation. It also doesn't, it often works against our planning when we see some of these reforms starting to be extended out. So like we've seen the recent support at home transformation being extended out by another 12 months, which I guess enables us more time, but also it does affect some of the planning that we have in place to be able to execute those changes in support of government. For Anglicare at the moment here in Queensland, it's particularly around, transformation of many of our systems, which we're undergoing at the moment. And certainly for many of our other colleagues in the industry, it's a similar story. So we need to be prepared for what reform throws at us by enabling those systems that support the day-to-day operations of each of our care services. So we are deep in the bowels of that work at the moment, and being a very early adopter of technology, particularly in the home care space. So I remember back in 2006, I think it was, Anglicare was the first Australian rollout of Procura here in Australia. So back then, very early adopter of a significant enterprise-wide client management system. However, we've remained on that platform now since 2006. And it's certainly time for us to now start to look at what else is out there and what improved interface is there with our clients and with our mobile staff as well. So being easier to deal with is certainly high on our agenda for any sort of change or significant systems transformation.
Is it a similar story there at Wesley Mission, Helen?
Yeah, very similar. I think when I'm looking at this question, one of the things that stands out to me is embedding change. I think there's a big appetite for change in the sector, obviously coming out of the Royal Commission. And we're all looking at how we can stay ahead of the reforms if we can. There's obviously barriers with the government changing things at the 11th hour. As Nick said, putting things off and then not giving us the right parameters that we need really to plan ahead as well as we should be able to. But once the changes are in, any changes, I think you've got the real challenge of the data and tech literacy issues in the workforce and in the cohort that we're looking after. And that is something that each organisation is really struggling to address, I think, and embed that change.
Yeah, interesting. And, from a supplier point of view, and this is a question for the remaining panelists, perhaps Gillian, I mean, you're in the home care space. And if I'm right, you've got a presence throughout Australia, as well as overseas. I mean, what's your view on embedding change with established businesses in particular?
Yeah, I think I guess my perspective is a little different because we launched Homage from the get-go of being technology centered and very driven. So, but some of the challenges I think or opportunities that we see are, home care is always going to be a high touch, operation, and it's very needed. It needs to be. So when we think about technology and, we've got so much now discussion around AI and robotics and even digital therapeutics, you think about what's that application in the home care space. And where I see a missed opportunity is how high touch is being empowered by high tech. So that augmentation and that integration to empower our carers. So what's troubling, put simply, what's troubling them? What's difficult? What are their pain points? Because we've indexed so much on a great care plan, care navigation, where there's still gaps. But I would say a big part of the gap is being able to, empower the carer, whether it's logistics, job assignments, mobility matching for the right skill sets and competencies to the right care plan, to lower costs and increase affordability and accessibility. So I would say that the way we've come at it is, and still looking to further improve, and there's still lots to work on, is to think about tech as a way to empower the carer and set them up for the right service for provisioning, and ideally remove all of the logistical administrative hassle where we can scale that delivery. So a big part of it is, mobilize, it goes end to end, is how do we onboard them? So all the documentation, collection, certifications, all of the back-end logistics fades into the background. But what ideally stands out is, what matters to the care recipient, them going through the door, them getting trained, making sure that's proper curation and time spent to interview them. The kind of structure we see in acute settings, because home care is inherently decentralized. In acute settings, there's so much structure, right? People go through proper interviews, but somehow for decentralized home care, to truly scale that and mobilize the kind of manpower up the pool and grow that pool effectively, based on the fast growing needs right now we're seeing across our states in Australia. I think technology has a real opportunity to further scale and mobilize the carer and support their needs more effectively. So that's probably one big point, front and center for us.
Interesting, yeah. And Julie, I mean, your offering, I know your offering is evolving as well. You've got some new things I think they're in beta test mode at the moment. I'm curious what your view is on this.
Yeah, so we did beta last year, and we're just moving into co-design now. So co-design is just being prepared. But I suppose, look, if I look at it from an innovator's point of view, that is, we're not in the market yet, so we're still figuring things out. I think that it's embedding technology and changes is actually really quite hard, and having a startup in the aged care industry is honestly not for the faint-hearted, in my opinion. And you might have the best idea in the world and you can clearly see it's a game changer, but how do you get to speak to the right people to get them on board and get them excited about your game-changing idea? I mean, that is actually really tough, and I've been innovating, and the Seniors Channel has been, we first came up with the idea 5 years ago, so it's literally not for the faint-hearted at all. I kind of see this as, I see the whole industry as a puzzle. It's like a big giant puzzle, and you have to put it together, but nobody actually gives you the puzzle pieces. So you have to figure out what are the pieces, and then most importantly, there are gatekeepers of those puzzle pieces, and you don't know who those people are. So you have to work out who are the people so you can get the puzzle pieces. Then you can work out how to put the puzzle together. And that's what it's like. And I know I've used that analogy a number of times now, and other innovators they just say, yes, that's what it feels like. I suppose that's why myself and my co-founder have started Australian Aged Care Innovators, because we want to support other innovators on their journey, because we know how hard it is. And we have worked out some of those puzzles, and we're happy to share them with other people. We don't need them to be gate kept. So that's how I feel about it. And I think that innovators need to be supported, because we're the ones that have the ideas and we want to help, but there's just so many barriers and so many challenges.
And Colin, your view is going to be interesting because I think if I'm right, Silver Adventures have been around for about 4 years. Is that about right?
Yeah, correct. So we've been going since the middle of 2019. I guess that from day one, we were very much aware that there was a journey to take the older adults on with VR, because they're not going to know what it is. And we wanted to be able to roll this out in a way that would build their confidence and kind of get them over the hump with the technology and, you know, make them want more and to do more in the future. But it was pretty apparent there's also a journey to take the carers on and sometimes even the organizations in terms of that innovation aspect. And with the carers, we really look to invest a lot with training at the start and holding hands, and you know how you roll this out successfully tends to be, it's a bit of a boulder to get going, but once it is going, it really, you know, picks up pace because they see the results and they see the smiles on their faces, and it makes their job easier, and you know, they enjoy it as much as the residents do. So there's still a bit of effort to get them to grab a hold of it at the start, and to you know, to learn how to, you know, to be able to operate everything and how to deliver these sessions with their residents successfully. So yeah, we definitely put a lot of effort into that. And then on the organization side, we've evolved that a bit further, where we found that organizations that perhaps have multiple stakeholders involved from day one, they've probably, you know, been the most successful ones that we've worked with, rather than just one, you know, head of care or head of quality of life, whatever the person is, where you've got a few different stakeholders in. It's proven really, really valuable for longevity and usage and growing that account and, you know, mutual benefits.
Great, thanks, Colin. We've had a question come in here, and just a reminder to everybody on the session that you can ask questions just by typing those in at the bottom of the screen. This question is from George Margellis from the Aged Care Industry IT Council, and he's asked, you know, what can the council and I suppose industry bodies like the council, what can they do to help? What do they need to do more of? Do industry awards help? And he's asked another question here: what procurement challenges do startup innovators face? So there's a couple of questions there, but let's just start with the first one. And this is for everybody. So we're not going to give these questions to individuals. I want everybody's point of view, both from the supplier as well as the provider. What other support do you need as, say, a provider, Nick? I mean, what more do you need from the collective bodies out there to help you do your job better through the adoption of technology, change, and alike?
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, George, for the question. As we know, like the Technology Council provides a really important opportunity for us as an industry to collaborate as a sector, and I guess provide that singular voice to advise up to government, you know, to inform on changes that we want and need to see. And particularly then to try and, I guess, engage in vendors on that journey as well, to understand how, when and why products need to be developed to support alongside the service changes that we need to implement. So I think having that real on the ground voice, I think within the Technology Council, and our CEO here, Sue Cook, chairs the Service Model and Workforce Reform National Roundtable as that. And I think the roundtables are a great discussion point, and they're a great network and representation of the industry. It's then, to George's point and question there around how do we take it then to the next step in understanding what is needed to really drive the rubber hitting the road. If I think and reflect on probably where we are in home care at the moment, there is a cavern of unknown around what does billing look like moving forward. So how will we be paid? What will payments look like? Will they come direct from consumers, direct from government? What does single health records look like? So My Health Record integration, all of these sort of projects that the Technology Council are working through with us. But I think there's still probably the point of understanding what government needs and how they want to interact with us as service providers to then be able to fill that systems gap in between. Certainly the Technology Council do an amazing job of actually pulling together the right sector representatives to have that voice back to government.
Great, thanks, Nick. And Helen, your view?
Yeah, look, I completely agree with Nick, and I think that more working with vendors so that we can integrate systems quicker to be more reactive to the changes that are coming on board, because a lot of established organisations already have their systems in place, and then to integrate any new technology or new systems is a real challenge at times. So I think working with vendors a lot more. And the other thing is a little bit more granular, but I've been looking at the ARIA, Aged Care Research and Industry Innovation Australia organisation, and they have little workshops where they actually project manage innovators, and then they go on and assess the innovation, whatever the idea is, and they will, believe through grant funding, help you to progress that into reality. So again, I haven't actually participated myself, but I think more workshops like that would really help progress innovation.
Right. And from a supplier standpoint, we'll start with you, Julian. What's your view? And you're welcome even to share your viewpoint with respect to both Australia, but if you think there's a relevance with your experience overseas, bring that in too.
Sure. I think some of the key topics that Nick mentioned, I think I strongly agree. The beauty is that, you know, we're actually operating in a fairly closed market as well. You know, I would say, speaking as an Australian, but operating in Singapore, that have spent then the last 15 years in the US. It's very interesting to see the difference in the sector, aged care sector, across the different markets. And I would say in Australia, we have, you know, I would say that the systems are actually a lot more open for interconnectedness, and there's a lot more transparency around funding. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but the data, for example, the commission across different disability support and aged care commissions sharing open sets of democratic data. I think that's something you know, I thought of as a given, but then now operating in Singapore, I realized that that's such a privilege to have. Just every single care plan, the financing, the line items, that's all published. And I think the council in the next phase of development can play a key role in further fostering interconnectedness from I would say, how can we help operationalize procurement? I think there was a challenge around procurement challenge. How can we integrate access to funding packages? Because over 90% of home care in Australia is funded by a small number of funding schemes. And so when you think about care navigation across support coordination, being on an NDIS plan, and then, you know, plan management, agency management, the routes of actually procuring and then successfully activating the right care plan, and then accessing the right carer, and then ensuring that there's end-to-end seamlessness, a very smooth journey to work with that service provider on an ongoing basis, providing great visibility back to their next of kin. I think that interconnectedness not only needs to take place from a provider perspective, so individuals, human organization, but also I think there's great potential on a technological level, infrastructure level, whether we're talking about, again, payments, claims plan, to the likes of referral flows, because most care journeys can start at home predominantly, but very often they start where there's an acute episode in the hospital. And so I would even say that there is an opportunity to foster better interconnectedness across different care settings, that the council, I think, can play a very instrumental role in starting to have these conversations across the different segments in the industry. And I see that as incredibly, you know, exciting, that we can do more of. So, you know, networking helps, but I think just having dedicated work streams or task forces that can look into pilots for example, hospital to home transitioning, where actually a lot of palliative patients do come from that route. They come from hospices. Whereas there is a simple way for hospices to refer out to home care providers that can then give them that amazing, that much needed experience during a terminal period of their lives, I think can be extremely meaningful and impactful.
It's a really good point Gillian makes, particularly around understanding what the customer journey typically looks like, but where all the different interfaces lie and the different avenues and intersect points of coming into the aged care sector as part of your client journey. We've recently done some work at Anglicare where, and it is literally, I think it's about 3 meters long, is this massive sort of piece of paper that we've got sitting up on our boardroom wall at the moment, understanding again what the client journey looks like from sort of no engagement with the aged care sector all the way through to palliative care. But then when you overlay what a systems journey looks like to support that client journey, that's where the significant complication really starts to look at just those intersects between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't agree with that more. It's just high levels of fragmentation. So one of the, I think, procurement challenges that startup innovators face is just, even for us, we take some time to map out like the macros on the systems level and a services layer and the operations layer. Can you imagine, someone who's a lay person just starting their care journey and they're also trying to navigate? So I think it's, this concept of integration, I think it's very key, and technology has a huge role in integration because it's much more efficient, I would say, for machines to talk to each other on an automated basis when you apply the right level of care logic, or what we call, operational logic or services logic that's really tied to the clinical safety and the quality safe, the clinical governance layer. So I see there's a huge role that the council can play.
Thank you. And Colin, what's your view? And also, one of George's questions here was about awards. So you know better than anybody how awards may help. What's your view?
Well, just onto the first point with the council and opportunities. I mean, we're obviously all here because there's a lot of problems in this industry, and I think that the opportunity to solve those is through innovation and emerging technology and startups. And I do think there's probably a gap and an opportunity for providers to embrace startups more, and probably maybe the council could act to help providers in terms of how they could map that innovation strategy out and how to embrace startups. So, you mentioned things like pilots. As a startup, it's like we've gone through that whole journey where you've had providers say, hey, we'll do a pilot. It's maybe not paid. And then, as a startup, it's kind of tricky because you're still trying to operate a business and grow as well, as much as you want to work with providers. Speaking from my point of view, and solely my point of view, we did a couple of sort of free pilots with big providers, and they were a massive flop. I guess there was no incentive to sort of kick it along or drive it forward without some skin in the game. We don't do that anymore. So things like maybe a project plan for a pilot of what the KPIs are and the outcomes and the people involved and the sort of cadences for how you're going to capture this information and measure it, and maybe even at the end of it, if it hits a certain target, what the outcome is for the project beyond just being undefined. I think that would really help, and maybe, like I say, the council could help with that. And on the startup side, I think a lot of people, in startups, my background's not in aged care, it's not in clinical, it's not in the sector, it's more on the tech side. There was a lot of mapping out to do with filling in gaps with my knowledge and network at the start. Julie was mentioning about gatekeepers and trying to unlock the puzzle. I think there's a real opportunity to sort of collide startups and providers more through events and programs that you could kind of get to understand the landscape a bit clearer and the customer journey, as Nick was saying. So it takes time to sort of understand all of that if you're not from this sector. And I think as a provider, like I say, there's real opportunities to embrace the startups. In other sectors, investing in startups, really having a partnership kind of approach where you both want to see each other be successful and grow. I think there's there's huge opportunity for these things in the future, and it's probably just baby steps at the moment, a better starting point.
Julie, what's your view?
Yeah, look, I agree 100% with everything that Colin just said. So I guess from my perspective, and George, thanks for your question. And I probably have a question back, and that is that, you know, with the round tables at the council, do you have an innovator on your round table? Do you, you know, are we invited? Do we get to have a say? And I think that is actually my message for this question, is that I feel, you know, innovators are underrepresented in every aspect across the sector. So I cannot afford to go to a trade show. It's so expensive. And, you know, we're not in the market yet, but I need to get the word out that the Seniors Channel exists. So how can I be represented, or how can the Seniors Channel be represented when, you know, trade shows cost upwards of $5,000, anywhere up to $15,000 to $20,000? That's just not realistic for a startup budget. So, you know, could there be, you know, startups being represented at trade shows and conferences? I think that would be one way, because how do providers find out about the emerging innovations that are coming in if the innovators can't get to all of these events? As far as awards are concerned, I actually haven't even looked into awards, to be honest, at this stage. So thank you for the reminder to start looking into awards. But, you know, I'm not at the stage where I would be eligible for anything at this stage. And, you know, I guess the Seniors Channel is emerging, but we are at co-design stage. So we've been around for a while. Again, this is why we have started Australian Aged Care Innovators, so we can bring aged care innovators up into the sector where people are starting to take notice. So I think it's vitally important that we think about how can innovators be represented across the sector. In relation to the ARIA grant, Helen, I'm actually in the weeds right now because the grant is due tomorrow. The last round is due tomorrow. So I'm, you know, as soon as this is finished, I'm going back to my 48 hours being awake to finish the grant. The thing is that when this is the last round of the grant, apparently, so when this round is done, then what? You know, what happens next? Where, you know, where can I go if I don't get this grant? Where can I go to get support? So, you know, fingers crossed I do get it. I think anyways, I guess that's my point, that it needs to be a continual process to be able to, you know, support innovation in the sector.
Thanks, Julie. I might just make mention of something that might be relevant at this point. Inside Aging did a Q&A with Dr. Mandy Solomon, and she's the lady behind Diva World, which is an interactive, I suppose, game for those living with dementia and their carers. So the interactive game environment, if you like, is really good for things such as preparing to go out and do a task. You can sort of simulate it almost in the game itself, which builds confidence and things like that. So it's quite interesting. But what's probably more interesting from a story point of view is the fact that Mandy launched that business in the US first, even though it's an Australian invention. And she's been in the US for about 4 years and has had success of funding around about $3 or $4 million. And she's yet to really generate income off that. And the funding's been on various levels, from pitch days and startups to programs at local level with, you know, the California government, if you like. So there's been a journey all the way through. Over 4 years, and now she's only now looking at launching in Australia. So what my question is, when we look at what else needs to be done, I mean, is it simply funding, or is there a whole ecosystem that needs to be in place? And this might be more for, I suppose, for the likes of Gillian and Colin and the suppliers, Julie as well. I mean, do you think there's more of an ecosystem or something like that needs to be embedded in the industry?
I do, if I can take this, I do 100%. There needs to be there needs to be a plan. Just like what Nick and Helen have been saying, the plans that need to be in place and the journeys, and Gillian said it as well. That needs to be the same for innovation. And there needs to be education for innovators. Again, which is why we've started Australian Aged Care Innovators, because if as an innovator, and Colin said the same thing, like, you don't know what you don't know. So I was in the industry before I started the seniors channel, but in a minor way. So I was a professional seniors entertainer. So I performed about 600 concerts in aged care facilities. So I was kind of on the outside of the industry. I had a few networks, but not inside the industry. So there still has been, every single day, I'm still learning something new about the industry. So I think that that's the missing link, that, all these people with wonderful, game-changing innovations, many of them we never hear about because they have to fold because there's not enough funding, and they don't know what the journey is, and they don't know how to take the journey. And in the end, aged care residents, consumers, and the sector miss out on, really good innovations that never see the light of day. Ultimately, most of the time we end up funding things ourselves, and that's really hard. So some, people are, we're just human beings. At some stage you have to say, look, I can't afford to keep going, I'm going to have to close this down. So I think it's vitally important that we support, both in a funding way and a mapping way, and an education way for innovators.
And Gillian, what's your view? You've done this both in Singapore, but also Australia. I mean, as in launching your business. What's your view?
Yeah, I would say that from an investment perspective, just speaking from the perspective of the private sector, aged care is greatly underinvested in. If you look at the fundamentals of investment as an opportunity for private value generation, right? So in return, even though it's the aged care sector, so there's a social component to it, investors are still going to look at it very much from the perspective of the business fundamentals. Is there a large enough market size? Are there opportunities to really drive great annuities and return? And I would say unequivocally, like there is in the aged care sector, whether it's in Australia, Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, ASEAN. And if you look at the funding amount, it's still very heavily, still very medical. So, and we think about aged care, what are the needs in aged care? When you look at really truly the long-term wellness, whether it's social isolation, problem statements, majority of the, I would say, solutions that are underserved are actually non-medical in nature.
Yeah.
And it's really helping someone live better, social wellness, mobility, mental wellness, great experiences outside of just being confined, and just enabling more control and dignity and independence in terms of optionality. And so when you think about that, then if you think about health tech, that's a segment that's very focused by investors. And if you look at the numbers, obviously now we're in a bit of a stranger, more dynamic capital markets at this juncture. We see still even health tech itself is slightly underinvested in, but it's still very skewed towards medical. And I would say that the next decade of investment opportunities, this is one sector that requires, I think that, however, I do see, because there's global comparables, in the US, we see many home care companies from an innovation perspective reach a threshold of value that is very interesting for family offices, to private equity investors, to venture capitalists and angel investors. So they, what is that threshold? They've become valued at more than $1 billion US dollars. These are home care companies, these are tech companies, and not just home care, but many other elder care or age tech companies. What's this category in the US are now, drawing attention. And I think I'm hopeful, and however, I believe much more can be done on the investment front to boost private sector innovation in the aged care sector. A second perspective, so maybe sharing a little bit about Homage's capital roadmap. I mean, we raised from a sovereign wealth fund, about 18 months ago. It was about close to a 30 million USD round. But one of the challenges is, I think, again, helping not decipher confusion investments from between what aged care as a category is. I think even just the need to educate investors on this is a very important category that will essentially be, I would say, lots of the value is shifting out of the hospital, out of acute into community and into home, where people live and want to live. And because life expectancies have grown, I mean, the Aged Care Commission recognizes this. That's the bulk of the opportunity. And we're going to have more elders than children in the world by in the next 20 years. So from that perspective, you think about how many tech companies and new innovations going into childcare and others. This is much more than elder care, I would say. So again, underinvestment, but that presents an opportunity. One other point is that I think there needs to be more operators that's coming into this sector, even though Australia, even though it's seen as though it's saturated, but from my experience, it's far from that, where the capital and financing model doesn't necessarily need to be venture capital backed either. So the financing model could be a really great lifestyle business that's making a great impact from a technological perspective, but kept, as a smaller outfit, whether, it's in Victoria or Western Australia, that we've seen many providers who are starting to think about operating, for example, a 30 to 40 team size, finance it through angel funding, initially, and then become sustainable in about 3 to 5 years. And I think that's very powerful. And I love connecting with such providers because they're very thoughtful about, the impact that they want to have and the change that they want to see. And but again, I can't wait to have more operators do well, exit, and then reinvest into the aged care sector, because I think this is just, in general, an underserved sector. Yeah.
We've had a question come in here, and this is for the providers, so for Helen and Nick. What would make it easier for you to work and license innovative tech products? Maybe Helen, what's your view on that? Because you've also, if I'm right, you've worked on the other side. You've worked with a tech vendor in the past as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So I've had a bit of experience with vendors, from not very good experiences, thinking of what Colin said, with people, trying to partner with providers. The one that I am thinking of we were going to white label something. There was an opportunity there, but it was actually going to cost us as a provider not just our time and our input, but also quite a bit of money. And we could not see the benefit of that in the long run, considering the change management program we would have had to undergo with that. And the other area was that I've worked and contributed to the development of a care platform across the community program. And look, we did partner with providers, and actually we're providers ourselves, so that helped as well. But I really do think that building up those networks, as Julie said, is really important, but making sure that you are able to map out exactly what benefits the provider would get from that, and be very clear in what the benefits are, because it can get a bit lost in the system. And in this industry, people are, there's a fairly big movement of people going from one provider to another. So if you don't establish really firm connections, then the project can get lost in the mix.
Thanks, Helen. And Nick, your view?
Yeah, Helen makes some really good points there, particularly around understanding what the problem is we're trying to fix. And I think from a provider's perspective, we need to be very clear when engaging, particularly in that collaboration sort of style agreement, and understanding what are the core problem or problems we're trying to solve, and not to try and open the shopping bag too broadly, because otherwise we could spend years, kicking the can down the road. And we've recently entered into a collaboration agreement with an assistive technology provider in terms of, certainly not at the startup stage, sort of more mature from a startup stage, but sort of certainly early into their life cycle as a business, and felt that the collaboration agreement that we have in place with them is enabling their agility in the stage of which they're in within their business to help us fix the problems that we've identified, and to kind of, through fixing some of those problems. And the main problem that I've got at the moment is being easy to deal with, as I said earlier, because we're not. So if that's my main kind of pain point, what can they do through technology, and through technology that's already known and used by our consumers to make us easier to deal with, and for them not to have lots of technology touch points within their own homes as well. So I think really understanding what the problem we're trying to resolve is, not trying to solve every problem that exists, because the wheels will just continue to spin, but then really engage in what collaboration looks like, so that the innovation provider or the tech provider is coming to the party, but we're equally there as a collaboration point to kind of resolve those operational issues that we've got.
Great, thanks, Nick. We're getting towards the end of the session, so we might finish up with a question that probably leads on from what Nick said there, and it'll be the questions for everybody, as everybody can have a chance to answer. And this is about a project or an outcome that you've been involved with, either as a supplier or a provider, that was successful, and what are the learnings from that you can share back? So perhaps, Colin, I mean, you've had a few things I know you've done. I mean, what can you share about an experience you've been part of that's been highly successful?
I just quickly realized that I didn't answer your award question earlier. So just very, very briefly, the awards are great. Everyone loves winning an award. If you're a startup, it's great for credibility and, marketing juice. I think that the best awards, or even accelerator programs with startups, the best ones we've been part of, and we've been fortunate enough to be part of a few, are the ones where maybe they actually check in on your journey and still, kind of go along with you and look for opportunities together further down the track, rather than just kind of a, one-time hit. So I know we're part of your webinar, but you're a perfect example where we won this award with you guys in 2020. And, you, through Inside Aging, you've done articles and stories and even the webinars and that kind of thing. So, yeah, those are stand out as far more valuable ones. Just to go back to your last question, can you just remind me what that was?
Just some learnings. I mean, Nick sort of almost answered it from his point of view. What we want to hear about is projects or things that you've been part of that have been successful. So what have you done where you feel, hey, that was good, and when you reflect on it, what were the things you did that got you there?
Yeah,
how you approached and how you dealt with them.
Again, trying to be, as concise as possible. I can think of certain providers we've worked with, and I can name one, like Baptist Care in New South Wales we work with. And it started off where we started working with the innovation manager, probably an obvious go-to, spotted what we do, and started that relationship there. It expanded to lots of other departments with quality of life, with even sales and marketing, looking for opportunities about what we were doing. And, lots of different stakeholders all kind of getting involved and communicating what we're doing rather than being in silos, which massively helped. And then we've grown with that group across multiple homes now. And I think the learning from that project is, like I say, the fact that if you've got one point of contact trying to drive this, as Helen said, you can put in 6 months of effort getting to know someone and getting a project, and then that person is gone, and it's like, oh my God, we've got to start from the start. So if there's multiple stakeholders, it just means that kind of continues, and it's not that one point of failure. And you get great insights as well from different areas of the business with what their priorities are, and seeing if you can offer wider value, broader value than just one area. So so that'd probably be my takeaway.
And Gillian, what's your view?
Yeah, I think one of the learnings we, because we work with other organizations to help fill their gaps for manpower. And I would say initially there was a lot of challenges around, and we're still, consistently trying to resolve some of these challenges. Because some of them have an exclusive period that they want to work with 1 or 2 providers, and some have a multi-bid system, and it's very, very different for each provider. And so I think one thing that we were then, team came together and we thought about what's the best way to use and apply this concept of enterprise technology to help them to meet the needs of the referrals to us in the most efficient way possible, even if they're on a multi-bid or based on their internal referral workflow. So during that mapping, I think took a while, and we're still at the tail end of it, so we're not completely there. But just mapping our our standard operating procedure to theirs, and then designing an integration, and then ensuring that there's adoption of our enterprise app. I think that was one where we now are seeing a good number of our partners on our enterprise app, but that took some time. And I realized that it actually just sometimes is about traveling down and having a sit down and sitting with their clinical care teams and helping them think about tech in a way that's very different, because now mental models, they're very strong in their own industry skill sets and their experiences. And it's at least a very fun conversations, but very different ones. And I see our engineers and our product managers almost speak a different language. And, it's just, how do you translate? So yeah, I would say amidst the challenges, good learnings, still working on it, but I think we've made some good progress. And I would say that's a win for the team. And they've done a great job with that. So, yeah.
And Helen, what's your view?
Yeah, look, I really resonate with what Gillian was saying there about the different languages and conversations you can have. I'm a registered nurse by trade and worked in the industry for a long time. And I know, certainly being part of that startup, a lot of the conversations that were had, I was coming at it from a completely different perspective and thinking that I knew which way we needed to go. And it wasn't that way at all. The end user, the research with people who weren't from the industry, just telling us what their problems were, really highlighted what we needed to solve. And it was nothing that aligned with what I thought we needed to solve. And I still see that now in a lot of the industry, is that there's this high level view of what industry professionals think need to be fixed. Whereas if you go into the consumer, and I hear a lot here about community care, it's completely different to what we may think is the problem. And our consumers and stakeholders they're not aware of what we can do with technology. There's a huge ignorance there, or lack of knowledge of how it can actually help drive efficiencies and connect people. And I think that's really important to have that conversation.
And Julie, you're probably at the start of your journey with the beta test and everything. What's your opinion?
Well, so look, I'd love to share 2 stories if I can, but I'll keep it brief. I know we're running out of time. So no, the beta was last year. So the start of our journey with co-design is happening now. But through the beta, I suppose, to put this in some context around it, during COVID, I filmed concerts to an audience of nobody because there was nobody allowed. And what we wanted to test in our beta program is, you know, the concerts that I used to do live that I had a really good response rate and engagement rate with, does that translate over a screen? And we collected data over 6 months, and considering that we tested a lot in with people with cognitive decline, and considering that they were watching something that was filmed in front of nobody, so it's an audience of 0. We're really happy to say that in our testing, 47.6% of people said that they felt happier after watching our concerts. Now, that gives us so much, I guess, momentum, because the real plan is to film concerts in front of a live audience and live stream them into aged care. So now we know that there's engagement and happiness, you know, when there is a recorded concert in front of nobody. Imagine how good that's going to be when we can do it in front of a live audience, live stream directly into aged care. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, again, I'll just mention it again, that we hosted our Australian Aged Care Innovators event on Tuesday night, and it was an enormous success. And I've just realised that Jeannie Marie is on this call. She asked the question before. Jeannie Marie is the co-founder of Australian Aged Care Innovators. And we're both so excited because we got wonderful people in the room. We had providers, consultants, innovators, corporate bodies wanting to come in to support us. But the main takeaway from it is that everybody in the room got to talk to each other, and everyone wants to collaborate and help each other bring innovation up into the priority list in the sector. So I suppose that's a very big win for the sector, knowing that, you know, innovation is going to be lifted higher.
Okay, thanks, Julie. That's probably a nice way to finish. So thank you very much. I've just shared my screen there just to remind people that the recording from today will be sent out to you later on. But also, if you're on the call, and I've just had a quick look to see who's joined, there's quite a lot of people with quite interesting backgrounds. So if you feel that you've got a point of view that you'd like to share in a future one of these, email our news desk with your bio, and you can certainly be on the provider side of the equation, somebody who's implementing change, or you might be a supplier who has some solutions. But either way, we'd love to involve you. And as I've said there, the next session will be in August, and I think we've struck upon a format now where every second or third month we'll have one of these sessions, and in some cases we will draw from, as Colin pointed out, we will draw from our Future of Aging Award winners and highly commended. So that's a good opportunity for, if you are in the market with a solution and you'd like to enter, you can do that now. The entries are open, and importantly, to qualify, you need to have a solution that has been implemented with a provider. So it's very much a situation where we want to have entries that have evidence of success. So you'll see that on the website if you visit Inside Aging. But thanks again to our speakers. I really appreciate your time and your candid view on everything. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks a lot, Sean.
No
Thank you.
problems. Thanks. Goodbye,
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.